Hello, I'm back today with another video. And so today, the topic isn't really anything super specific. It's more just kind of the overall trends of how I think the future economy might be structured. And so, full disclosure, I am not an economics major. I'm not an expert. I took one economics class in college. Um, I got, I did get an A in it, but I don't remember any of it. And so this is a very amateur take on things. But here we go. Okay, so everybody's been talking about how AI is going to change everything in terms of like the economy. And most of the talk, I think, so far has been about billionaires and basically how, basically, the concentration of wealth in the hands of like a few tech tycoons will kind of change everything. And so far, it does seem to be kind of going in that direction, right? Like most of the benefits of AI have been going to basically a few companies like Nvidia, Facebook, Google, stuff like that. Um, which I think is a fair point, and I think is a valid thing to kind of think about. But I actually want to take a very different angle to this, actually. I want to talk about how, in the future, most people will be compensated and how basically work will be done. And also, as I previously said, these are just my personal thoughts, so don't put any weight on them for now. So I want to start by introducing this idea of a palace economy. So a palace economy is a kind of economic structure that existed in the Bronze Age. So this is like the 1600s BC. So think like ancient Egypt. Think Mesopotamia. Think of like the ancient Greek, Cretan civilization, Cretan and Minoan civilizations, things like that. Basically, like around the Middle Eastern area. Just a lot of kind of civilizations around that area in the late Bronze Age had this thing called a palace economy. And what a palace economy basically is you have a central palace, right? Like a central kind of like authority, usually a religious authority. And then every year, the people would kind of have their harvest, and then they would be taxed on their harvest into the central palace. And then the central palace would take the tax on everybody's harvest and they would redistribute it to everybody else, right? So basically, it's a redistribution economy, right? So they take what everybody has kind of harvested from the for the year, and then they redistribute it to everybody based on basically what they need. And if you're familiar with the story of Joseph from the Bible, it's very kind of similar to that, right? It's kind of like grain storage, kind of that kind of vibe. And so, why do I bring up the palace economy? I think we're in some ways we're kind of going back to a kind of palace economy in the AI age. So let's back up a little bit to kind of explain what I mean. So yes, so back in the day, everything was based on a palace economy, and so basically the pharaoh or the king or whatever kind of ruler of the civilization there was would basically be all powerful, right? If you are in charge of the redistribution of all resources in an economy, then you're basically God. You're basically all powerful, and for that reason, like the pharaohs and the kings were basically considered as gods back in the day. But then as time went on, the biggest kind of like economic innovation over the last few years has been, of course, the market, right? So the market is kind of based on the idea that there's no one person in charge of everything, but it's just millions of individual actors that kind of are exchanging resources and exchanging kind of goods and services with one another, and this whole thing altogether is called the market. And so the market, at least in theory, it provides for a lot more of a decentralized take on things, right? So it's not as one person is in charge of everything, but uh, since there are so many people involved, there's no one central kind of planning committee that is in charge of basically the entire economy. So that's been the major development, and that's also kind of led to the development of democracy and things like that. At least if you believe kind of that theory. And I think the internet, coming to like a more recent example, I think the internet is basically an extension of the market in a lot of ways. It's basically the ultimate market. It's the instant global um, market in a lot of ways, right? So if you think of like a place like eBay or Amazon, it's basically the market on steroids where um, rather than like a kind of a stock exchange or ships going across the ocean to exchange goods and services, they were you can make all these sorts of exchanges and kind of these payments instantly, globally, and that's probably the reason why the internet has basically subsumed so much of the economy is because it's just like a hyperspeed market that kind of that operates on all levels. So that right, and then okay, so basically, so far we've been seeing this transition from a centralized palace economy to a centralized palace economy to a kind of more market economy to a digital market economy, also known as the internet. And I think with the advent of AI, I think the big pattern is that that modern AI systems, including LLMs or like image generators and things like that, they can take old resources and they can remix them to make new content, right? So that's basically what like all these transformer based AIs actually are, right? So for example, if you ask ChatGPT images to say, hey, make me an image of this scene in the style of Studio Ghibli, right? Then it'll take all the Studio Ghibli images in its training data, remix it, and give you like its own original image. And so right now, Studio Ghibli does not get paid for any of this, which is where the big controversy comes in. But I think eventually they will, and eventually, like for every single Studio Ghibli style generation, I think Studio Ghibli will receive a royalty, and I think that is kind of how like the modern state regulations are kind of going. And imagine basically that's how artists get paid, right? So imagine I'm an artist and I upload stuff to the internet. Um, I upload stuff to the internet, and whenever somebody generates anything that uses my style, then I get 3 cents for every single generation, right? So they don't have to know who I am, but let's say I create watercolor paintings and upload them to the internet, and somebody else requests, hey, make me a summer scene in a watercolor painting style, right? And then the AI basically references my style in some way and generates an image for that person. In that case, right? So even if even if my style is not the specific one that's being requested, if it uses, let's say, 5 to 8% of my style in that generation, then I will get paid 5 to 8% of whatever token costs that AI has. And so very quickly you can basically imagine how it this kind of operates very similarly in a way to the old palace economy, right? Where everybody kind of uploads their work to the central AI, and then everybody downloads content and downloads kind of generations, right? So if I want to make a Christopher Nolan style movie, right, and ask it, I ask the AI to generate a Christopher Nolan style clip, right? Then Christopher Nolan would receive a part of that, right? So the actual processing power is in the charge of the AI, but basically all of the all work is uploaded to the AI and all work is downloaded from the AI, right? So basically we are uploading our souls. We're uploading our kind of souls and our artistic styles to the central big kind of Pharaoh like AI, and we're also receiving it back, all this content is being redistributed back to us. Um, yeah, so very quickly you can see how kind of this central AI would basically assume this all-encompassing power. And so I've decided to call this AI the Orb, O-R-B, the Orb, right? Just to give it a name. But you can very quickly see how if something like this existed, then the Orb would basically be this kind of all-powerful thing that kind of runs the entire economy. Very similar to, if you've seen Wall-E, the AI Auto, right? That kind of runs the entire ship. It'd be very similar to that. Um, yeah, and so what does this mean, or what does this mean you should do? Number one, I do think that basically the uh, I think the most common type of work in the future will basically be that of like a solopreneur, right? Where like, it's very difficult to see the use of, let's say, a Studio Ghibli or any kind of like large operation that involves like uh, millions of people or hundreds of people, thousands of people, whatever. Just because there are just because the amplifying power of the AI is so great that basically um, having one person just define the style and having the AI generate everything else is a lot more efficient than having one person define the style and having a bunch of people try to replicate that style, right? So Hayao Miyazaki, he draws something, and then right now a bunch of his lower animators all try to replicate that style, but I don't think that's really how it'll work, right? I think Hayao Miyazaki will draw something, and then the AI will be able to just generate a million different drawings in that exact style. And so all the human really needs to kind of contribute is like their essence, their style, their kind of like core, their artistic core in a sense. Um, what does this mean politically? I do think that there won't be a single orb. There'll probably be multiple. And right, because like each kind of like each political sphere will want to kind of be able to control its own economy, right? So there'll be several different types of like kind of like nationalized AIs that will uh, they'll basically be in charge of pretty much all economic output, right? So uh, everybody does whatever they do, right? So if you're like a researcher, you write papers. If you're an artist, you draw. If you're a filmmaker, you make movies. Whatever that work is, and then you just all upload it all to the kind of the nationalized or like kind of centralized AI system. And then if you want anything, if you want a movie, if you want a research paper, if you want a book or anything like that, you can just make it by requesting it to the AI, and of course that will cost tokens, right? But basically, since the central AI has access to basically all the output of that political sphere, it'll be able to upload anything and then download anything very easily. Um, yeah. So are we heading back towards a kind of I don't want to say theocracy, but that kind of political structure? Maybe. Who knows? Um, yeah, it does seem like look at the world today. I think it does seem like we are heading towards a bit more of an authoritarian streak than most people thought we would be in the 21st century. But I do think that by default, AI is a very kind of centralizing and um, almost authoritarian technology. I think Peter Thiel talks about this, where he basically says, crypto is kind of a libertarian technology if you think about it, and AI is kind of a communist technology. He says communist because he's very libertarian and he doesn't like communism, but I would say authoritarian rather than communist. Just like I think it's a very authoritarian technology just in general. It's very helpful for any kind of big centralized machine to be in charge of an entire system. Cool. So on that cheerful note, we will end this video for now, and I'll see you guys in the next video. All right, see you guys.